Raise your hand if you're a basketball fan. Anybody a basketball fan? It's okay to raise your hand in church, by the way. I'm not going to drag you away. Okay, so there's a few. I'm not really a big basketball fan, to be honest with you. I mean, unless it's like Auburn basketball, and then I'm okay with basketball. Okay. And then I love basketball. But the truth is, when March Madness rolls around, it's pretty easy for me to get sucked into kind of the craziness of March Madness. And the reason for that is really just kind of the nature of the game of basketball. Basketball, there's just something about this particular sport where, the lead can constantly change and go back and forth, and it doesn't matter, at what point in the game. There's always this sense of there's a chance. Even if your team's been losing the whole game, there's always a chance. And so, teams like UCLA, that was an 11 seed, made it to the Final Four, made it all the way to the Final Four. I mean, it was unbelievable because that's only happened a few times that somebody, that's seeded that low has actually made it to the Final Four. That's just a handful of times, and yet they did. And the reason for that is because at any given day, it just seems like any team can win when it comes to basketball, even Auburn, and which is great. But the reason for that is because as long as there's time on the clock, you've always got a reason to hope. It doesn't matter. We've been losing the whole time. There's 10, we're behind 10 points and there's a minute left. Oh, we got this. You're thinking we've been losing the whole game. We're still behind 10. There's a minute left. I got all the time in the world. It's like there's still time on the clock. The buzzer has not sounded yet. The couple of guys, they're big guys about to go to the bench. He's got a bunch of fouls, and we've got a couple of timeouts left, and a couple of threes, and we're back in this thing. That's kind of what we're thinking. There's always reason to hang on to hope in basketball, which is exciting. And hope is a good thing. It really is. Sometimes it's feels hopeful to have hope. But hope is a good thing because it motivates us. Isn't that true? Just the thought of what could happen and what could be, it motivates us. It kind of causes us to work and to push forward and to try hard and to try new things and to think and to dream about what the future may hold. And it pushes us, it motivates us, and that's the great thing about hope. And the nice thing about Easter is that it reminds us how to hope. That even when it comes to the things that are happening in our lives, there's always reason to hope. And Easter, maybe this year, last year and this year especially, more than at any other time in history, I think Easter is relevant as it pertains to our hope, having hope. Because, at Easter, we're thinking questions, begins to answer questions like these. Does God care about me? Is God really out there? Is there, does praying to God really matter? Does he really listen? Does he care about my family? Does he really care about our country? Does he really care about the direction that things seem to be heading? Does God really care? And of course, at Easter, this is why this is so relevant. At Easter, we're reminded that the answer to all those questions is absolutely yes. He does care. He is there. There is reason to have hope. There is reason to trust that God does care and that he is with us. And I don't think in history there's been a time where that has been more relevant for you and me than it is right now, except perhaps for that very first Easter. Maybe that very first one. The advantage that we have, though, is, of course, we've got history to look back on. We've got something to actually hang our hope on because we can look back and read the stories and remind ourselves of what God has already done. But for those first Christians, you've got to think about this. This is why this is so important. It's where I want us to go today. For those first Christians, they didn't have anything to hang hope on. For those first followers of Jesus, those who were with him, even those who were closest to him, they thought that it was over. And the reason for that is because they had watched Jesus die. Those closest to Jesus had watched Jesus die. And of course, when Jesus died, hope died with him. When Jesus died, their hope about the future and about who Jesus said he was, that they had hoped that Jesus was the Messiah. He had claimed to be the Messiah, the promised Savior of Israel. And so it wasn't his teachings, it wasn't his miracles, and they had seen him do all of these things. They had seen Jesus bring people back from the dead. And so they had reason to hope, at least until they saw Jesus die. They watched Jesus do incredible things, but then they watched Jesus die. And of course, that doesn't make sense because after all, he said he was God himself. And you can't crucify and kill the Son of God, can you? And so in that moment, think about this. We don't think about this a lot when we're thinking about Jesus and Easter and Christianity. Think about this. Jesus was dead and gone, which means they were dead wrong. Jesus was dead and gone, and it meant for them they were dead wrong. That's what they were thinking in that moment. In other words, the game was over. The game was over. The buzzer had already sounded. There was no time left on the clock because they had watched Jesus die. And so clearly he couldn't be who he said he was. Clearly he couldn't be the Son of God. There was no more Jesus, which meant there was no more Jesus movement. Now, maybe you haven't thought about this before. Maybe you haven't considered this before. Maybe you're just here because you're hoping for a really nice lunch this afternoon, and that's great. But if you could just pause for just a second and think about this thought that when Jesus died, everything that Jesus was doing, it felt like to those who were there that had died too. There was no more Jesus, and it didn't matter what he taught. It didn't matter what they said they believed. It didn't matter what they expected and what they had hoped for. It looked like the game was over because Jesus was dead. Their leader, their teacher, their rabbi, the one that they had followed, it just didn't matter. None of those things mattered anymore because Jesus was gone. And it just didn't add up. It didn't make sense. And there was no expectation that anything was going to change in that moment. They had lost hope. And those who had followed him and those who were closest to him, you think about the disciples and stories of faith, and you think you struggle with, this idea that Jesus, this guy who lived 2,000 years ago, was there really even a Jesus? And, well, even if there was a Jesus, did he really come back to life? And yet, the very people who followed him had these same questions. Because in that moment in history, in that moment in time, when they watched Jesus beaten and crucified and put to death, everything they were doing died with it, and they thought it was over. Game was over. There was no reason to hang on to hope. I don't know if you feel that way sometimes. That sometimes there's just not a reason to hang on to hope. But thankfully, we've got more of this story. Well, let me just tell you that one of the guys who brought us some of this story is a guy named Mark. Mark was a traveling companion of the Apostle Peter. Peter, one of the guys one of the prominent disciples who spent a lot of time with Jesus. And Mark spent a lot of time with Peter, and he had heard Peter tell these stories over and over and over again for 30 plus years, until the point Peter had actually been in prison. So this is decades after Jesus had passed away, right? And so now Peter is retelling some of these stories to Mark. And what he doesn't know at the time, since he's been imprisoned in Rome, he doesn't know that he's not going to leave there alive. And so somehow in this moment, Mark is kind of coaxing Peter to retell some of those stories. Just tell us once again. I'm going to write it down. Let's cut to the chase. It's it's the shortest of the Gospels. He leaves out a lot of details, but it's like, Peter, just tell me the good stuff. And it's like when they get to this part where Jesus has died and has buried, and is buried, it's like they can kind of put themselves back in. It's like they pause for just a minute, and Mark says, now hang on just a second, Peter. I want to make sure I get this right. Tell me what happened one more time. And Peter says, well, Jesus had died. And so Joseph of Arimathea, prominent member of the council, would have been like the Supreme Court in Jerusalem, who was himself waiting for the kingdom of God. In other words, Joseph was one of these hopeful disciples. He had hoped that Jesus really was who he said he was. He was one of the ones who had hoped that Jesus was going to be the one who ushered in the kingdom of God. But like everybody else, he had lost hope. Why? Well, because he had seen Jesus just pronounced dead. Joseph didn't have reason to hope either. It was over. But he went boldly to Pilate, the Roman governor, and he asked for Jesus' body, an unusual request. Pilate was surprised to hear that he was already dead. Jesus was already dead. And so summoning the centurion who oversaw the crucifixion, he asked him if Jesus had already died. And when he learned from the centurion that it was so, he gave the body to Joseph, which in and of itself is extremely unusual that he would have given this body to this man. So Joseph bought some linen cloth and he took down the body from the cross and he wrapped it in the linen, placed it in a tomb cut out of rock. And then he rolled a massive stone against the entrance of this tomb. Mary Magdalene and Mary, the mother of Joseph, saw where he had been laid. And so they too knew that it was over. I mean, these were people that were hopeful, that were following Jesus, that thought maybe he really was the one, but they had lost hope as well because they had seen Jesus die. Well, when the Sabbath was over, when it was okay for them to go out, it was legal for them to go out and to work, Mary Magdalene, Mary the mother of James, and Salome bought spices so that they might go to anoint Jesus' body because they too had lost hope. They too thought that Jesus was dead and that he was going to do what dead people do. He was going to stay dead. And so they were going to further prepare the body because after all, Joseph and actually a guy named Nicodemus had done kind of a slipshod job, the night of the Sabbath. And so, that wasn't going to work. So they had to prepare the body further. And so listen to this. Very early on the first day of the week, just after sunrise, they were on their way to the tomb. And they asked each other, who's going to roll away the stone from the entrance of the tomb? Is it going to be you, me? Who's going to do this? But when they looked up, they saw that the stone, which was very large, had been rolled away already. And so they did what I don't think I would have done. They entered the tomb. They saw a young man dressed in a white robe sitting on the right side, and they were alarmed. Don't be alarmed, he said. You're looking for Jesus the Nazarene, who was crucified, naturally, because his body should still be there. You saw where his body was laid, but he's risen. He's not here. See the place where they laid him. And then he continues, but go, I want you to go and watch this. Tell his disciples and specifically make sure that Peter hears this. I like that because this is like Peter talking to Mark, retelling this story, and he said, but man, I'm telling you, they were making sure that I heard this news. Tell his disciples and Peter, he, Jesus, is going to go ahead of you into Galilee. There you will see him, just as he told you. And so they were excited because they knew something had happened. They knew that there was no body there. They couldn't find it. They didn't know what exactly had happened, but they had met this stranger, and he had told them that Jesus was alive. And so, maybe a glimmer of hope for that moment. But they ran back, and they told the disciples. They followed exactly what he said to do. But they did not believe the women. They didn't believe them. Are you surprised by this? Anybody struggle with the belief or the idea that Jesus was resurrected? You're in good company. Those who knew him personally had doubts. They didn't believe the women because their words seemed to them like nonsense. That's crazy talk. Have you ever had that thought? What is it with these Christians? This is crazy talk. Why do you believe in this? It's so crazy. What are we doing here? Peter, however, got up and he ran to the tomb, and bending over, he also went in, and he saw the strips of linen lying by themselves. And watch this, you would think clearly he would have these flashbacks and go, oh, this is it. This is the moment. But look at what Mark, who's writing down what Peter is telling him, listens to what he records. He then went away wondering to himself what had happened. I wonder what happened to that body. Not, oh my goodness, there's reason to hope again. It's more like, What in the world has happened? Oh my goodness, they're going to blame us. We're going to be in some trouble. Because at this point, all of his followers had scattered, and they had hidden, and they had denied even being associated with Jesus because they were fearful. They were scared of what was going to happen to them because of what happened to Jesus. And so this idea of the body not being there, this wasn't necessarily good news because after all, they were going to blame them. And yet we have this incredible picture. Peter and John, just a couple of months later. Now, think about this. I know, like, we read the stories and we hear the stories and we think we've got it, but think about the reality of this. Peter and John, just a couple of months later, in the very same city, in Jerusalem, not years later, not decades later, not, rumor has it, but just a couple of months later, in the very same city, among the very same people who had actually watched Jesus' crucifixion and watched him die, they began preaching in the streets and even in the synagogue. Jesus Christ is alive. Jesus Christ is alive. What? What were they thinking? I mean, what happened? This wasn't a long time later and legend, kind of got, exaggerated and passed down. And so now it was kind of a, this folklore kind of tale. This was just a couple of months later. I mean, don't you know that this would have been so easy to disprove for those who were there? I mean, just produce a body. Okay, here's the body. Clearly they're lying to you, so don't trust them. And yet, and don't you know, think about this. The religious leaders of that day and the Roman authorities, they had every reason in the world to do away with what they were saying, to disprove this. To do everything that they possibly could within their power to eliminate and to disprove what they were saying, to get rid of this idea, And yet nothing happened. They realized they couldn't do anything. There was no body. They didn't have it. They couldn't show it. And yet they also recognized that the body was missing, that it was gone, and they didn't know what to do. And so, of course, they arrested them. They seized Peter and John, and because it was evening, they put them in jail until the next day. The next day, the rulers, the elders, and the teachers of the law, they met in Jerusalem. They were trying to figure out what to do. Annas, the high priest, was there. So were Caiaphas, John, Alexander, and others of the high priest's family. Some of the very same people who participated in the crucifixion of Jesus just a couple of months before. The very people who Peter and John were hiding from just a few weeks before. And yet, they had Peter and John brought before them, and they began to question them. And they said, by what power or what name did you do this? Now, what they're referring to is this miraculous healing that Peter and John had performed. And it was in front, it wasn't like in hiding or in secret or they had heard about it. This was in broad daylight in front of large groups of people at the temple, like in the temple court. And they had healed a man who had been lame since birth. He couldn't walk, and they had healed him, and everybody knew who he was, and because he had been there begging for years, and yet now they're seeing him walk around. There was nothing they could do about it. They were like, oh my goodness, clearly something has happened. We've got to figure out how they're doing this. What exactly are they claiming here? Why are you doing this? By what power are you doing this? It is by the name of Jesus Christ of Nazareth, and watch how bold this is, whom you crucified. That's bold. But whom God raised from the dead. What happened in these guys? They had lost all hope. They had seen Jesus die. They knew it was over. It was game over. There was no reason to hang on to hope. And yet here they were in the streets, and even in the face of death, in the face of persecution, having been imprisoned, having been arrested, and here they are with the very people who had the authority to do to them what they did to Jesus. And yet they say, you remember that guy you crucified? He's alive, and he's the Son of God. And watch what they note Peter and John were there, and Peter's retelling this, and he remembers what they were, convening about. When they saw the courage of Peter and John, the courage. They were cowards just a short while ago. Now there's courage. The courage of Peter and John, they realized that they were unschooled, uneducated, ordinary men. Nothing amazing about these guys. And they were astonished, and they took note that these men had been with Jesus. There was something different. They didn't know what to do at this point, so they had to let him go, but they gave him a warning. Don't talk about this anymore. Don't talk about this Jesus any longer. But Peter and John replied, which is right in God's eyes, to listen to you or to him? You be the judges. How bold must they have been in this moment? What gave them this boldness? As for us, we cannot help speaking about what we have seen and heard. That's why. You see, what began for them just a couple of months earlier as a sign of weakness and a moment of weakness, a moment and a tragic loss of hope when the game was over. There was no overtime. It wasn't a tie ball game. Death had won. Jesus was gone. No more Jesus movement, no more followers. Nobody believed in Jesus any longer. They loved Jesus, but they just didn't believe in him anymore. And yet now they're saying, we have seen and heard something, and we can't stop talking about it. And it's that Jesus Christ is alive. We saw him die, but now we've also seen him alive. That was their story, and they couldn't help but talk about it. So now let me ask you, let me bring us back to today, to where we are today. I want to ask just a couple of questions here. Let me start with this one. Why are we here today? What in the world are we doing here today? Have you thought about that? Because some of you might say, well, that's easy. I got this one. Can I answer that? It's easy, because, my mom made me come to church. That was easy because, it makes my grandma happy and I'm going to get, dinner afterwards. Or, we always go to church on Easter, that's just what we do. It's Easter. That's not why we're here. And let me tell you this. Regardless of why you think you're here today, I promise you this. There's only one reason. There is literally only one reason why we would be here 2,000 years after these events took place. There's only one reason, and here's what it is. It is only because of the resurrection of Jesus. Only. Think about this for just a second. Hang tight. Without the resurrection of Jesus, there is no Jesus movement. Everything ended in that moment. And we would have never heard about the stories of Jesus. There would have been no reason to. This failed Messiah, why would we hear that story? We wouldn't have a Bible to tell us about the stories of Jesus. It wouldn't be here. There wouldn't be a Bible to read. And there would be no reason in the world why we would gather together in a high school 2,000 years after the fact and sing songs about Jesus. You see, the truth is, without a resurrection, where is their hope? Where is their hope? And you might think, there's hope in other things. I hope in the future. I hope for what is to come. I hope in my abilities or my strengths, and I hope in my family, and I put hope in what is to come in the future, and I'm hopeful. But what offers you the kind of hope we were just talking about? Without a resurrection, why in the world would we be here? Why would we be celebrating something that actually didn't happen? Because we would have never heard about it. This would not be news to you and me. We wouldn't be here today. And where else are you going to find hope? Where else is offering you this? What else is offering you this? You see, the reason, let me remind you, the reason that we're here today and can hold out hope no matter what happens, 2,000 years ago when he died, And today, no matter what happens or what things look like in your life, it's only because Jesus Christ is the risen Son of God. That's really the only thing worth putting our hope in. And the great thing, the magical thing, the most amazing part of this is that God has invited us into this story. He has invited us to have this kind of hope. I mean, we're hopeful about things. We hope we graduate. We hope this ends so I can go to lunch. We hope that they don't find out. We hope, those are but the kind of hope that changes your life, the kind of hope that you're willing to hang on to and bank your future on, is only this kind of hope. The kind of hope that God has offered you, that He sent His own Son, put on flesh, came into this world, and accomplished what you and I couldn't do. And then He offered it to you and me because He loves you. Because He so loved the world, put in you and me, put in your name. He so loved you and me that He gave His one and only Son. He gave, in spite of knowing what we were going to do, how we were going to live, the way we were going to rebel against Him, the way we're going to resist Him even now, the way that we're just kind of bothered by it. Even then, He died for you. That whoever believes in Him, whoever puts hope, hangs their hope on Him, will not perish, but will have eternal life. For God did not send His Son into the world to condemn the world or to condemn you or me. Instead, He came to save the world, to save you, to save me through Him. Last question. Do you have that kind of hope? Do you have that kind of hope? I mean, what else offers you that kind of hope? Is it, maybe you're thinking, well, me? Is it hope that comes from you or from your career, from your job? Is it hope, in your finances? Hope that things are going to work out and get better suddenly? Hope that, somehow the leaders of our country are going to get it together and they're going to get on the same page and, the right people are going to be in office. Is that what your hope is in? Is your hope maybe in your finances, your stuff? Because every person in this room knows the truth, knows the answer to that question. We know where that leads. I mean, we just do. We know that doesn't pan out, that doesn't actually work out for us. So instead, God has invited us into a new kind of hope. The kind of hope that is a living hope, the kind of hope that is life-changing. And what you need to know today, no matter how you're feeling right now, no matter what's going on in your life, no matter how resistant you are, no matter how much water is under the bridge, so to speak, or I've got so much regret and so much stuff in my past, let me just remind you, it's not game over. There's time on the clock. There just is. And there is room to hang on to hope. Would you pray with me? For some of you, you don't have that kind of hope. And you're not sure you buy this, and I get that. I really do. You're not sure what you believe. But it's worth considering. Can I just invite you to maybe take a chance on hope? What do you have to lose? You've tried it on your own. What do you have to lose? What are you really risking by placing your hope in Jesus? So I want to invite you to declare that today. You can pray right along with me. A prayer doesn't fix you, doesn't save you. A prayer is simply a statement of what is true in our heart today. So if you're ready to receive that kind of hope, would you just pray with me? Something like this: Jesus, I want to put my hope in you. Heavenly Father, thank you for sending Jesus, for making a way, for making the way I know placing hope in myself is futile, and I don't want to do it anymore. And so I'm placing my hope in you today. I'm going to transfer my trust from myself, and I'm going to place it in Jesus. Would you fill my life? Would you give me new life? I give it to you in Jesus' name. Heavenly Father, thank you. Thank you so much, because I know people all over the world today are making that decision to follow you. And Lord, for those who are in this room, maybe joining with us online, Lord, I just pray that you would meet with them in a very real way, that you would fill them with that hope, with your Spirit, with your goodness, that they would sense your presence in a crazy way, in an unexpected way, and that they would leave here different, that they would not leave here unchanged. And it's not for us. It's ultimately for you, God, because you offered it to us. You are the reason. You are the reason we have hope. And so we are here to celebrate that hope in you. We pray this in Jesus' name. Amen.